Hi, Carol. How are you?
Hi, Nizam. Fantastic. It's a bit chilly here in Scotland today, but that's all good. We've had a hot summer.
Okay. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to interview you. So, friends, I'll give just a very short description about Carol, and later I'm going to provide the website link because her credentials have started but never ending. So there's a huge credential. So I'll keep it very short. So Carol is an artist, inventor, author, consultant, coach, psychosensory specialist. Just this I'm gonna tell because if I go with her credentials, the entire interview gonna take only about that. So I'm stopping here. Carol, how did you get into this field?
When I was about 13, so back in the 1970s, I found when people have sales of secondhand things, I found two big bags of books about Eastern ideas.
Okay.
And the people who were selling the secondhand stuff, thought this wasn't suitable, so they put it in a bag for the rubbish. And I looked in and I was like, wow, all these old papers, and so interesting. So I said I would take it to the bin, but I was 13, so I took it for myself. So basically I had, in those bags, I had some experts library of things we're all familiar now, with yoga and Reiki and energy work and, managing our state, and lots of documents about hypnosis, old documents about hypnosis. So I loved reading, so I was very interested in those things.
That's how it all started.
Yeah.
And then what happened next when you started reading?
So then what happened next was quite, so I experimented because I was a great experimenter, and I found that it was very useful with horses and dogs and people, and just so interesting. And then when I was 17, I went to art school, and I went early because I'd rented a house, and I thought there would be lots of people there in parties and things. I was a typical 17-year-old, but of course nobody was there because college hadn't begun. So I was very bored. And so I looked in it was a shared house, a student house. I looked in the shared kind of book area in the sitting room, and there was some funny books. One of them had a kind of a horse on it. And I thought, oh, I like horses, I could read this. It's a very interesting book. It was one of the first books on neuro-linguistic programming, and I was 17. And it was just so important to me. That one was reframing. So it was just so important because it gave me the idea that I could shape myself. So I got really interested in this idea that, anytime you feel stuck and trapped in your history or your ideas about yourself, you can say, let's change that. It was really helpful for me because the art school was a really challenging environment. When you go to art school, it's not like going to university where they say, okay, this is how it is. You learn it. Now repeat this to me. You can do that. That's just take study and da, 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 da. In art school, they say to you, think up something new and do something from inside of you that is completely new to the world. And you go, oh, and you look at all the masters, my whole class, there was 80 of us or something, you look at all the masters of art. I mean, you go right back to Stone Age times and you think, oh, it's impossible. And then it's quite funny because I ended up being an inventor. So, and because I was doing NLP, I started to ask, so basically I wanted to go on a course. I couldn't go on a course. And so my father was like, no, you can't. How would you go to America from Scotland? This was 1980, 81, it wasn't so easy. You've only just gone to art school. You have to finish what you start, Father's very strict, you can't just take a new interest, you know, to focus on what you're doing. So I was really cross. And so I thought, I could make the art school my school. So I could make it. So this was a very lucky thing to do, actually, because it meant that I would read something in the book and it would say something like, you know, people delete things from their conversation, or they generalize or whatever. So they would say that. So I think, okay, I want to see this in the wild. You know, is this true? Can I see this happening? So everything I was transferring to real life. So I was seeing NLP in the real. And I think that's very important. So it's like utilizing it straight away, because the danger of learning NLP in a classroom is that the way that humans learn, we connect things up to the context. So we can become very good at NLP in a room learning, but when we walk out the door, we don't do NLP anymore. So I think in my disadvantage, I was lucky. And so, of course, I was asking cheeky questions to my teachers. And so I was doing meta model, can you imagine? And so I was asking questions. And I found they didn't have the answers. And then I was like, oh, they don't have the answers. Wow. And then they would say things to me like, well, you know, it was good enough for Rembrandt. So, you know, shut up, it's good enough for you. And then so I was thinking, well, how do you know it was good enough for Rembrandt? So then, of course, I would study hundreds of years back and discover that Rembrandt was asking the same questions as me. So that's how I came to start finding solutions for things.
Excellent. So that's how a scientist was inside.
Yeah. So my husband says that because I sometimes say it's like parallel, like the interest went parallel, but he says no, it was like a golden line through everything. And I think that's true, you know, because when things happened like writing books, huge books, which modernized the field across the world. So it was like creating world change. And that I wrote about that in my PhD. And I was aware of that and aware of that kind of responsibility, if you like. But because of knowing about things like NLP, I was like, I have no idea how to do this, but I can do it. I will learn, you know, I will model other authors. So I modeled cookbooks in the end. That's how I found a way to write about how to make art. So the NLP is right in there, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you lived NLP.
Yeah.
You lived it. Awesome. And let's get into other interests of you, Carol. So you are into having techniques also. So could you please tell me more about this having technique, and how is it different from other modalities, its benefits?
Yeah. So you are a EFT trainer, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. So havening is a psychosensory process, as EFT is.
Mm-hmm.
So in havening, we think about the psychosensory processes as being EMDR, TFT, EFT, and there are other ones like TTT, and the bars, and there's a few eye movement ones, aren't there? And then havening, they're all psychosensory. I like the umbrella term of psychosensory, because it describes how we use sensory input to generate change deliberately. So there are other psychosensory therapies that are not therapies, psychosensory processes that they don't start with an intention to create change. So they're like a kind of another layer, and there's loads of them. So that's kind of fun, because you can kind of integrate them. So there's things like massage and acupuncture, and acupuncture is maybe in the top layer. So you have to think about things, dance, horse riding, all sorts of different, drumming, all sorts of different things. So it's a rich field, isn't it? So I think havening's gives us something special, because I like the fact that if we do some havening touch now, it's from the shoulders down your arms. If you like, you could do some and see what it's like. And one thing to do is to think about something that you like, just something like, you know, when you make yourself a nice drink, or somebody else makes you one and you, oh, it's so nice. Or in the morning when you can have a lazy day, when you're not interviewing somebody and you can have a sleep and know, oh, the day is mine, I can do anything I like. You know, something nice like that. Or, you know, the first time you had a great experience or something. So you think about something like that, and then you can do some havening touch, and you can use your palms, so palm to palm, and it's the touch is, it generates it's a sensory input that signals safe to the brain, because, you know, this is what our mothers would do, or some caring, you know, another caring human would touch our face in this gentle way. Or even if we think about crying, sometimes, you know, we cry,
Yeah.
kind of after a fright, and think of those big tears pouring down our face. It's like it's making delta wave, you know, the worst is over kind of thing.
Okay.
Or when we wash our face, or there are many prayer or many different things where we use very specific hand movements. So in havening, you just have a simple contact with the palms. You could imagine, Sandstrom imagines rolling a pearl, or you can, sometimes I find myself doing it like this. So we know all these areas from the science base. I love that havenings has this scientific basis. So it's like Dr. Ronald Rudin, who created havening, he looked at the other things like EFT and TFT and tried to think like, well, how is this working? He looked at all the modern neuroscience. So how is this? What is happening? How can these changes happen so quickly? And so he realized that this is working with the electrical system. So so it's different from something like taking a pill, which is working with our kind of chemical system. So it's working with the electrical system, and that's why it's so fast. And of course, our electrical system then, so we're working with the neurology, it then influences the chemicals. So did you notice doing that you feel, what did you notice?
It is like someone loved one, you know, or like how I was taken care in my childhood by my mother.
Yeah.
It made me also feel like, you know, safe, secured kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's I think that it's a bit different in that way from the other psychosensory processes, because when you're moving your eyes, well, it's fantastically effective. You can't do it for very long. And even when you're doing EFT, there are specific patterns that you follow. Whereas with havening, you can do havening for a very short time and create very fast change, or you can do it for longer. And then you can bring in things like, I like to do recreational havening. So, you know, maybe I've had like really thinking and writing, or working with a client who's had something very sad happen or something. And I go out into the garden and my brain is still thinking of the client, and I'm like, that's finished now, it's done, you know, the brain is still da 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 da, you know. So I think, okay, so, you know, I'd like to just enjoy the garden. So I just start to do some havening touch, and then put my attention on something I like, you know, the leaves moving, or the grass, or the stones on the pathway. It can be so simple. And then just start to direct my thinking to something else. And so, of course, when I'm doing the havening touch and making this slow brainwave and signaling safe to my brain then goes, okay, you know, quietens the right amygdala. So then I can start to access other areas of my brain and start thinking about other things. And making different connections. And then before I know it, I'm always interested in not wasting any time. I like to kind of maximize my time. So, which is, you know, you're sort of saying I've done lots of things. I think one thing that I'm good at is not wasting time. I very rarely waste time.
Awesome. Thank you.
That helps me.
Yes, yes. That really, it also gives the taste of how having technique is.
Yeah. So you know, anybody listening, you can, you know, you can just experiment, just do some havening touch. Sometimes start off, sometimes you're feeling, you know, thinking of something happy, something good, some resourceful state. It can be something very simple. It's good to do one that's like frequent, something that you do often, and then just notice how I say it amplifies that. It helps you, it helps it the electrochemistry starts to really be active, and you start to have the chemicals, and then you start to really notice it in your body in the now. So that's a good way to start. And then you can experiment sometime you're feeling a bit anxious, and you can notice how quickly that comes down. And then the havening techniques themselves, I think they're very beautiful, because they're the key techniques almost kind of, I say almost, but I mean, I can't think of a gap. It's like all the different techniques that, you know, I've explored in my life, also hypnosis and all sorts of different things. It's like in havening, there is a process that encapsulates that. But sometimes there's sort of advantages to it I really like. So for instance, there's a process called outcome havening, where the person talks about, you know, something that happened. So to give you an example, a client was telling me about something that went really, they thought they were doing a really great thing, but it actually all went really wrong. And so it was all kind of a disaster. And so it had really terrible, you know, the cascade of things that happened after were really serious. So first of all, with havening, we changed the neural pathways that were activating the amygdala, that were affecting them. And then what we did is we looked at the story that she'd told herself about all of this. And just like you would do in hypnosis, but instead of using a script or the practitioner making the story, the client makes a story. So they make a fantastic story, and they bring in, you know, superheroes and cartoons and action and sounds and all sorts of different things, and then tell me this, they tell me how it's going to be, you know, and the names of the characters and the action. So they build the whole story, if you like, which is this fantastical story, because the brain loves this kind of thing. Brain just loves metaphors and everything. And so I got my focus on, like, get it right. So I do, we practice, and I go, this is this, and they go, yes, more emphasis. I go, so they're clients really in control. It's like get the therapist working, you know. And so then perhaps they would do the havening touch themselves and just get into a relaxed state, or perhaps the havening touch would be facilitated by their loved one or a friend, or by the havener. And then you tell them the story, and you use all your skills as a hypnotist, you know, how you would sort of bring, first of all, create a starting point, but you're using all their information. So it's absolutely, and if you get it wrong, they can put their hand up and go, you know, it's like, correct it, or they give you a nod, you're doing well there. And it makes such a difference, because it's such an interesting process, because, you know, when I've experienced it myself, is of course afterwards, you know, that fantastical story where Superman came in and sort of rescued you, and everything all changed and went in a different way. Of course, you know that that's not true, but it gives the brain a lot of peace. It stops you playing over that thing, because it's not happening now anyway, is it? So why keep playing it over and over again? So you start to play the new one, which of course makes you smile. Yes. If you think of that. And there's another process similar to that called role havening, which is so beautiful, because in that one, the client teaches the havener how to take the role of somebody. So it might be, you know, the role of a loved one that they didn't get the chance to say goodbye to, or the role of a loved one that they want to have an argument with, you know, or a spiritual entity, or a place, or all sorts of things. Or even, you know, I've had clients who just really have a problem. Maybe they have diabetes and they keep eating cakes. So it might be that the Havener takes the role of the cake, and you know, they can have a conversation with this cake. So it's very, very, very creative and very beautiful. I love it. So, and some of the processes are very, very quick. There's a process called event havening, which is really great. It was the first process it was developed, and it was designed for when we experience something that's got specific components. We encode it in part of our brain called the amygdala, and we all have these kind of experiences. So if you think of an experience sometime where you know, you maybe weren't feeling very strong, you know, maybe a few other tricky things had happened, or you'd been tired or unwell or something. So your kind of landscape is vulnerable at that point. And then something happens that you think is inescapable. So, you know, you just think, this is, you know, you don't know that you're going to survive or what's going to happen after. You just think, oh, this is completely inescapable in this moment in time. So that makes your brain, this makes this part of your brain go, I'm ready. What's happening? You know, something's up. I have to look after you. And then if we give it, depending on what meaning we give it, you know, so we can be in one person can be in an experience and they can think, wow, this is exciting. Yeah. And another person can be in the same experience and be terrified, you know, really think it's going to be the end for them. So the meaning we give things is very important. And so when we give something a meaning that we think we're going to lose something, so we're going to lose our life, or lose our limbs, or lose our loved ones, or lose our job, or lose our safety, or lose our place in society. Any of these things, you know, people are going to say bad things about us. We won't be liked anymore. So it'll be quite small things, you know, quite, you know, to a child, you know, something the first time they fall out with their friends, you know, oh, yeah, it's like all over, you know. So of course our brain is like straight on there, like this part of the brain, and so our learning takes place quicker than normal. So we make so we know when we learn, we make a neural pathway. The two neurons come together, one signals to the other, and this one makes doorways, really receptors. They open, the message can then cross the gap and pass through these doorways and continue to signal to make chemistry. So normally we learn quite so slowly, you know, we taste something and we think, oh, that's quite nice, and then we, you know, taste it again and think, oh, yeah, definitely like that. You know, if we're learning maths, maybe the teacher has to repeat it again and again, and eventually we learn it. But when those four things come together, we learn like this, super fast, and it happens here. So from then on, all the sensory information of that moment. So if we were having an ice cream and we'd just been saying, I'm really happy, and then the thing happened, all of those things are collected. So it's like a kind of snapshot of time, everything. So the things we don't sort of notice ordinarily, you know, there might be a sweetie wrapper on the floor, but our brain notices it all. So that's all collected, we call it encoded. And the brain uses that to keep us safe in the future, because we hate uncertainty and we always want to save time. We always want to be economic and because it keeps us safe. And so it's always matching. So it might see a sweetie wrapper on the floor while we're eating an ice cream, go, oh, oh. Or you might say, oh, I'm having a great time. The brain goes, oh, oh, last time you thought that, you know, better get ready. So then we get flooded with adrenaline and cortisol. And then what happens, the person says, oh, I have anxiety. But really what's happening is we've done some sensory matching, or we think it. Sometimes we just have to think it. We just have to think about something like, I don't like it when there's sweetie wrappers on the floor, or I might have an ice cream. So I love that. I love that about havening. For me, all those things I was interested in over the years, when I started to study with the Rudins, suddenly I was like, oh, I don't understand what they mean. What does this mean? This is different. It's all new. Oh, You know, I have to use my know nothing state, and I have to use my curiosity because it seems like a jump. But then that got me to read about modern neuroscience, and then I ended up writing to people and saying, could you, neuroscientists, and say, could you speak to me about, you know, this, because I would like to talk about it. So they've been very generous and spoken to me on Zoom, you know, and helped me understand. And then I started to realize, gosh, it's actually really simple. It's really, really simple. And really, when you teach children it, they're the best. You know, you teach 5, 6-year-olds, they're like, they have it, you know, they're like, yeah. And they accept, I mean, you'll know that yourself, they accept fast change, don't they? They're like, that's handy. So
wonderful. Good to know about this beautiful modality.
Yeah, and it goes, you can use it, you know, with EFT or coaching or psychotherapy. It's really lovely.
Yes. So you have covered my further questions of internal sensory system and psychosensory system. Yet, could you please tell a little more about this psychosensory system, Carol?
About psychosensory, or do you mean internal?
Internal sensory system and psychosensory system. What are they, and how they are different?
So if I get you right, so psychosensory processes is I think it's a term that Ron Rudin came up with, and it gives us an umbrella term to understand
to all these modalities.
Yeah, which is really good. So if you think of it, he talks about it being the 3 pillars, which is a good way to think of it. So we have pharmacology, it's one pillar, and then we have psychology, where we're talking about things, and then we have psychosensory, where we're using, you know, tapping or havening or eye movement to work with the electrical system, so through sensory input. So it's like a new field that, you know, we have done it as humans, we've done it forever. You know, maybe in Stone Age times we had more touch between us. We, you know, you talked about with thinking of your mom, and maybe we continued those behaviors longer. Maybe we did more natural depotentiation, because that's what happens. So when you learn, you make a pathway, which is called potentiation. And then what we know now in very modern neuroscience is that the doorways also are reabsorbed. So we send them a signal, and which is like, I don't need this anymore, if you like. And then they become, there's a kind of glue that holds them, like a concrete stuff that dissolves, and then they're free to be reabsorbed back into the neuronal surface. And then down here, they get recycled. So it's all very green system. And so then if you imagine this one, say it's like, we were once scared of dogs, and then we met a nice dog, and then we were like, oh, I like dogs now. Actually, you know, I'm quite brave, it's all okay. Or we did some havening. This one is signaling, there's a dog, and it goes across, and the traffic can't travel. It's like the doors are closed. So this one moves away, and it's a new connection is then made. So then the new connection would be, I like dogs. Traffic. I'm ready to be curious about meeting more kinds of dogs. So in havening and EFT and all of these things they can help us learn, and they can help us depotentiate. So you could say it's unlearning, but it's just really part of the learning process. We're doing it all the time in our brain. If we look at a little bit, it's pathways are coming and going and changing, and new connections are made. It's just fascinating. So we are always able to change, even though when we hear ourselves saying, I always, or I really dislike lampshades or something like that, then we really should have a question going, oh, maybe I could. I'm always experimenting myself when as soon as I hear myself saying, I'm bad at maths, or I'm always dislike whistling, I'm like, oh, time to change the brain. So that's psychosensory. And I think you're asking me about a brain sculpture and brain art, asking about internal sensory.
Internal sensory.
Yeah. So the whole thing, going right back to being interested in the art, you're very much working with internal sensory information, yeah. And so, so they'd say to you, think of something new. Nobody's ever, so your brain, how can you do that? You're computing lots of different things and trying to think, oh, you think I could do that? Well, somebody's already done that. Or what's left to do? Surely everything's done. So you're not, it's not like you're reading something and repeating it. You're investigating what's going on here. So, and then of course I read about NLP and NLP submodalities. So I got very interested in that there's a format and everything. And then when I started doing havening, I was like, wow, because that internal sensory information, of course, it comes from how we learn. So it's like I was saying, so there's the image of the sweetie wrapper on the floor, there's the taste of the ice cream, there's the temperature of the ice cream, there's the, what it's like when we smell a lemon or taste a lemon, all that, all the sounds and vibrations and then all the meaning we give to everything, like, do I like this, do I not like this, do I move away from it, do I go towards it, all that stuff. But it's we've got a massive dictionary in our brains of internal sensory information. When I started doing havening and EFT and things like that, I realized that there were different things happening from the models that were provided in NLP. So I was and it felt like NLP had all these kind of rules where, you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that. But I was like, that's happening in havening. So I would get all these new submodality sequences from doing havening, and they didn't really fit with the NLP thing. So I thought, this is actually different. And in havening as well, we work with the content. So, when I was saying about with doing the outcome havening, where you change the story and stuff, that's actually working with the content. So, so the person might say, like, I'm really scared in my bed at night because I think that there's a big man going to come in the house and, it's going to be really bad. So there's a scale thing, isn't there? And there's a man thing or something. So she did a brilliant thing. So her news story was she became, I don't know if you know the cartoon character of the Hulk.
Yes.
The movie.
Yes.
Yeah, big green guy.
Yeah.
So she's a very beautiful woman and everything like that. So I, as a hypnotist, I would never have come up with that story. I wouldn't have said, you become the Hulk. I might not be brave enough. So when I was asking her, what new outcome can you do? She's like, I'll be the Hulk. Isn't that interesting? So instead of the scary big man coming in, she becomes the big man and she can chase away anybody. So it's really, really about content. So we don't use that so much in NLP. We tend to look at the format, has it got a frame, how far away is it? Yes. We don't kind of delve into the content. So I found myself sort of in this place where it wasn't fitting. So I started to have a new word for it, and I started to talk about, and that opened it up for me, because then suddenly there weren't any rules anymore, and I could, if somebody was imagining white flashes, and I was like, fine, that's okay. Or if they were imagining a feeling becoming a picture, that was fine. So it just opened everything up, and I started to realize, how people, they might present with something that was like, one lady just had diagrams in her mind, everything was diagrams. And so I was able to work with that. So internal sensory information is the information that we collected, our dictionary of information, and it's when we access it. So the other thing that happened when I learned EFT and havening was that I've noticed this, that it's highly effective and it's really fast. So the changes can happen in seconds and minutes. It's so quick. So one of the things when I was teaching, because I'm a trainer, so you're teaching other therapists how to do it. And so how to teach them to go fast enough. And so the client says, oh, I have a big problem, and then they're doing havening, and then suddenly they say, oh, it's silly. Yeah. Well, what they mean is they're worrying was silly. So for a new therapist doing it, the change is so quick. they're a bit like, what is the technique silly? And the person isn't so good at explaining how they've changed. And so I found that if you taught the client to notice their internal sensory information, specifically their brain art. So brain art is a name for when you have a collection of sensory information, all relates to one neurology, if you like. So it's a bit like, if I think about maths, straight away my brain art is from way back. It's like one particular maths teacher who I didn't understand, the classroom, even I can feel my nose moving, you know, the smell of that place, the sound was had a very kind of high acoustic, everything sounded really sharp there. And I was obviously really stressed. So that's like a collection of brain art. It's specific to me, just saying, if I think about maths, I can go to that one memory. I could then move it and think of some other ones, but each one would have a brain art. So I found that if I taught therapists how to teach their clients about internal sensory information and brain art, and to be able to talk about it, then they could track the change, and the clients could track the change. So after a process, so say they're doing this and so do that one again, so go, oh, the worry. Instead of saying, oh, it's silly, they say, oh, that picture's just gone. Yes. And my mouth feels different. And that feeling that I was stabbed in the back, that's gone. Or now I have a bright light. So they start to give you a lot more feedback. So I wanted to create so brain art and brain sculpture kind of create a way of us engaging with fast change methods and engaging with our own progressive change and engaging with understanding that everything's really happening in the brain. So it's a bit like the other day somebody was talking to me and I was thinking, I'm a bit grumpy. What's my brain art? So my brain art wasn't anything to do with what was happening. So I was engaged in this situation, but my brain art was something else. So I can always ask myself, is that helpful? Is it not helpful? It's not helpful. So make brain art about what's happening now, connect with that. So we're always in the now. That's a funny thing as well, is that, when we often talk about getting to a quiet state, we might put our tongue up to the roof of our mouth. We might just, really focus on our weight until it seems quiet. But in fact, anytime we're thinking about, that internal sensory information, whether it's from like I did there from the 1970s or something that we think is going to happen in the future, although we call it past and future, it's really now because it's our neurology. Yes. So in a way, it's kind of like, it's I wanted to create a new way of us being able to talk about what brain art are you making at the moment. And to understand that our brain art, if I continually think I am bad at maths, then, when somebody tells me a number on the phone, I'll be like, I can't remember that. Yeah. So it changes the shape of our neurology, that all the connections are going to change because we're sculpting our neurology. We're brain sculptors all the time. Whereas if I make some changes using havening, so I changed that fright I got in the maths class. So then I start to realize, so my amygdala doesn't come on stream if somebody says a number to me. So this used to happen to me. Somebody would say a number and I would just go white fog. Oh no, I'm going to look really stupid. I'm meant to be a clever person. Oh no, my God, oh my God. If somebody asked me the time, what's the time? I couldn't tell the time. Really. Oh my gosh, really? Yeah, I couldn't tell the time. No. Panic, mass panic. Or if I went to get a plane at the airport, all the numbers would all move around and I'd be like, oh Jesus, when is the plane going? I'm going to miss the plane. And I have to ask somebody, what does that say? And then I wouldn't really trust them and I'd be really, it was horrible. It's all moving around. So when I did havening, it was very exciting because I could suddenly tell the time. I could suddenly go to the airport, and it was amazing. It was like a miracle. I'd look at the board and I go, weird, those still they're not whirling around. Horrible experience. So then it's like just noticing your brain art to see if you're still saying I'm bad at maths, and instead of that saying, actually, I can do that now. Now I can catch up on my learning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Carol, still I have a question about brain art and brain sculpture. So
Yeah.
are these brain art and brain sculpture part of Havening, or did you
No,
develop your own methods for which Havening is a must, or anyone can directly get trained under you for brain art and brain sculpture?
so Havening's whole separate thing. You can
Yes.
train with me or other trainers to be you can learn Havening for yourself, or you can learn Havening to be a practitioner and work with other people. So you can come and study with me to do that, or you can look on havening.com and there's lists of events and trainers and everything. And then when I was doing all of that and all of that exploration, I just found that it just kind of developed, but it didn't really fit with Havening, because Havening has its whole thing. So it came about that way. And it came about as well when I was teaching therapists. I don't know if you do this, but I always think that people think the same as me. I know this is not the case. I've learned that, but I always have a sort of, if you know something, you kind of think everybody knows it. Yeah, because it's so familiar to you. So when I was teaching, I'd be like, why you don't know that? That's odd. They don't know that. How can they not know that? Because to me, it seems really obvious. So then, of course, I'd try and explain it. And I had no words, and I had no labels. I had no structure and what was I doing that was different? So I always think teaching is a great way of learning, because you have to kind of share the communication, and the person has to understand it. And so from that, I realized, probably the first thing I realized was I was doing a thing I call Quok2, which is really easy and really useful. And I realized I use it with everything. So for instance, if I'm riding a horse, rather than following the script, so the script might be kick the horse and the horse will, yeah. So instead of doing that, I am on the horse, and then I question, what am I doing? My hand is soft and gentle and is forward. My body is moving with the horse. What is the horse doing? The horse's ears are happy. The horse is calm. Then the horse goes tense, and I think, what am I doing? So I question. Oh, my hand is tight. Because why? Because my brain art is thinking, oh, this horse riding is dangerous. I could fall off. And then the horse's feeling is tight. So it's like an analysis, a continual analysis of everything. So first you question, then you observe, then you notice what it is you've observed and measure it. It's called calibrating. So you calibrate, then you track it. So you think, oh yeah, when did I last do that? And how often have I done that? And then you can start changing it, because you can think, oh yeah, every time I see that lady coming when I'm on my horse, I make my hand tight. And then the horse gets nervous, and then he fools around, and then I'm embarrassed. And then next time I see the lady from even further away, it all happens quicker. Do you see what I mean? Just like sort of undoing all of that and using EFT and Havening. I love it that you can, maybe not in the moment, but you can come home and you can think, okay, what is it about that lady? Think about the lady, the brain art. Okay, it makes me really nervous. Why is that? Oh, she reminds me of the time my auntie gave me a row. Okay, save me, my auntie. Oh, that lady's not so bad. Next time you see the lady, different, and then the horse is different, and then you break the cycle. Okay. Yeah, so I like Quok2, so I call that Quok2. So you're questioning, observing, calibrating, tracking, and then utilizing. So you can utilize and then use your psychosensory processes to make the brain sculpture change, and then the sequence changes, and then your life changes. And then the other part of the other thing that happened when I was havening was I noticed that people say they were sad about something. So I was working with a little boy, and he had, yeah, it was very interesting. He had seen, so he was in the park and his parents wanted to have a chat about adult stuff. So they said to him, he's a small boy, they said to him, you look after your grandmother. You are in charge. You're a big boy. Take your grandmother to the ice cream and buy an ice cream. But for the little boy, the responsibility was too much. He took it seriously. Really, they just wanted to have a chat and get rid of him for a few minutes. You know, so he took this idea very seriously. I have to take care of my grandmother. Oh, I'm a big boy. No, I'm not really a big boy. You know, all of this brain art, yeah, all of this information. Then he saw on the other side of the park, on the behind the fence, a big dog, and he imagined the big dog coming and eating his grandmother. Well, it happens in stories, yeah. So like all that Red Riding Hood stuff and everything we tell kids. So he imagined all of this and he became very frightened. And he had a panic attack. Yeah, poor wee boy. So he had, you know, a learning like this really fast. So what he told me, so in the session, his parents were there, sitting back a bit, and he was speaking to me. So they were behind him. So he was speaking to me, and he was saying, this big dog ate my grandmother. Oh. Yeah. And the parents were behind going, no, this did not happen. This is not happening. But he had
believing that.
Yes. Yeah, he had encoded that because our brain doesn't know the difference between what is in the dark. Our brain is in the dark. We tell it the story. It goes, okay, sure, like a pathway. You know, like ice cream lorry is dangerous. You know, being a big boy is dangerous and stuff. So he had that. So I don't argue with him. I say, because it's in the brain. It's real. So I say, okay, you know, okay, so it's activated. You can see this pathway that he made then is activated, and he's stressed in the moment. So I say, okay, do the havening touch. So he does doing the havening touch, and then I say, okay, I want his working memory here, this part of the brain, to be active. So I want to make him think of directions and things that make your working memory active, like counting, humming, doing lots of things like gymnastics for the brain. So I get him imagining things, and he's very good. He's imagining scuba diving, and he's scuba diving, and oh, it's great. His full attention is now on this wonderful scuba diving. And his parents are behind going, how does he even know about scuba diving? He must have seen it on the TV. Yeah. So he's fully imagining it. And this is very good because I'm saying, and, you know, do you see anything yellow? So I'm just using a bit open language. So he's exploring. But I know when he's doing this, he's activating here and also his hippocampus because he's doing directions. And then I'm saying to him, imagine collecting 10 things that are completely new to you, you've never seen before. You're going to bring them back. And you can do that. So you can bring them back in his brain art, can't he? So that means that he's doing like a shopping list. That means he's using his working memory. So this is all good. So meanwhile, as he's signaling safe to his brain and he's busy here displacing the information, this pathway he made before depotentiates. Okay. It's gone, yeah? So now his fear response is going to be gone. So we stop and say, take a minute and okay. You were telling me about when you had to look after your granny and what happened. And he goes, you know, because now there's no amygdala activation. Yeah. But of course he remembers, but now he remembers what really happened. Right. So now he says to me, oh, well, I was worried about looking after my granny. Yeah, so we know the parents are like, yeah. And I saw on the other side of the fence a big dog, a really big dog. And I said, was it on a lead? He said, yes, it was on a lead. It was pulling on the lead. And I said, was there a gate? And he said, no, it was just off fence all the way around. You know, so the dog could not come in. So now he has, I thought it was so interesting because now he has the real information again, the real thing that happened, not the imagined thing that scared him. And so when I asked him how he felt then, now, he didn't say that he was at, in the subjective units of distress scale. He didn't say I'm at 0.
Mm-hmm.
He said 7. He said, so children always are kind of in the middle of a scale. So I think he'd said something like he was scared 8 at the beginning, or maybe he said he was scared 6. Yeah, he was scared 6. And so I said, so where are you now on the scale? And he said 7. And his parents were like, bad therapist, he's more upset because they couldn't see his face.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, steady. Let's see. So I was like, 7 what? And he said 7 feeling brave, feeling fantastic. Yeah. And I thought, oh, that's so interesting. He's gone, he's gone down and up.
Yes.
He's past 0. He's gone away up here again. So then I started to teach people a bit like when we started, think of something nice and how good does that feel on a scale of 1 to 10? And they'd say, oh, it feels like maybe 5. And then we say, let's do a bit more and more. So we get it right up to 9 or something. It feels really great. So they'd have that on a scale. And then I found when I did something, worked with them with something that was upsetting them, they used the subscales differently. They gave me more information. So instead of saying things like, I could get the distress again, or I can remember the distress, or this distress is gone, that's weird, they would say, so say they felt angry rage at a relative. So raging, has been raging for 60 years. Do the havening about the first event that they were first frightened of the relative. Then afterwards, instead of saying they were at 0, they would say, I'm at 4, feeling sad for the person. And I say, tell me more. And they say, well, I understand that person had a really hard upbringing and really difficult time, and now I'm full of sympathy for them. And then they might say, oh no, now I feel guilty. So they'd be back on the scale again. Guilty, maybe 7. Yes. Then we do a little more havening. And then they'd say, now I'm full of understanding for myself and understanding. So it meant that we just, it's hard to explain really. It's like kind of thing you would do, and then suddenly you'd be like, oh, it opened up. And I found that it meant that people would finish session on the other side of the V scale, whichever side they chose, and they would be feeling perhaps calm or confident or more understanding to themselves or more kindness to themselves and to everybody, rather than just poof, down to one thing. Does that make sense? Yes, so I call that the V scale. So I learned it through havening and EFT. That's where I learned it. And then I was like, there's no tool here. So I'm an inventor. So I think if I can't find a tool, I'll make one.
Yes. So it kind of gave the answer for my next question also, like how coaches, healers, therapists can get benefited by learning this brain art and brain culture. They can really...
Yeah, so I think if you come and study brain art and brain sculpture with me, what it can help you do is, if you're a client, it can teach you to be able to access your internal sensory information, to use it so that to your benefit, and to understand that we're always working with our neurology and we can change our neurology. And it means that if you're working with an EFT person or a hypnotist or something, you can track your progress. If you're a practitioner, it means you can learn how to use those techniques with your clients, with yourself as well, so that you've got kind of, it's a whole framework of working. So you start with a happy state, you teach them the V scale, and it also gives you more, I found I got more accurate SUD scales after teaching them the V scale, because they'll be very honest. They kind of know, they've kind of got it really sussed in a different way. And they'll tell you if they've sort of changed state. And I think the other thing with psychosensory processes is, and you'll know this, is it's very dependent on what they're thinking. So, you know, so if we're doing havening and we're meant to be thinking about the road accident, that's the pathway that's going to change. But if we're sitting doing havening and we can't concentrate and we're thinking, how much is this costing? Or is this silly? This is silly, doing this arm stroking thing. Or, you know, I'm hungry, or, you know, I have to do something else. Then those are the pathways. So brain art and brain sculpture can help the client activate the pathway that's important for the process. And then you get really accurate information, because if they're thinking about something else and you're doing the process, and then you say, okay, think about the road accident now, they'll go, well, it's just the same, because they haven't thought about it. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So it's to go alongside it.
Yeah.
So, and it doesn't have there isn't a change process within brain art and brain sculpture other than cognitively being aware of things, which can make changes just because you're aware of it. But there isn't a fantastic sort of psychosensory, you know, so you want to learn your havening or your EFT for that, or your NLP. It's very simple.
Yeah. Right. So thank you very much, Carol, for your vast, for your time and answering all these questions. It was wonderful to know about this brain art, psychosensory, you know, havening, and I also got to experience it. Really, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Friends, I'll be providing all the website and other information in the description. If anyone is interested to learn this havening or brain art, brain sculpture, you can reach out to Carol. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.